Hey, what's up, everybody? Scott Spreitzer here. He's Indian Cowboy. We're DocSports.com's white chocolate for the weekend, beginning February 21st, 2025. Boy, some really good and interesting games going on this weekend in college basketball. We're going to cover a few of them. Iowa State, Houston, for instance, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Kentucky, Alabama, and looking forward to jumping into those with IC in just a bit. Real quick note, if you're not yet a member at DocSports.com and just want to give it a trial run, click on that link below the video and get yourself set up for a free $60 account. You can use those free $60 on any of IC's daily packages or any of mine. It's been an interesting week with the NBA coming back. I had the Brooklyn Nets. We're doing this on Thursday night, folks, and I had the Brooklyn Nets on Thursday plus 13. They ended up pushing. They go 11 for 19 at the charity stripe, and I have to settle for a push. But when you're back to the Brooklyn Nets against a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers, it could end up worse than pushing, no doubt about it. How you doing, man?
Good, man. Yeah, I had my 8-unit prop yesterday. I don't know if you knew about that. My 8-unit prop was on LaMelo Ball over 24.5 points. He had 9 at the half, and he ended with 27 because the last time he played the Lake Show, first of all, it's his hometown, right? He's going back to his hometown, and he got hurt in Charlotte, and he only played 8 minutes. So I was like, man, this guy's going to be pumped up. And plus, Bridges shot like the ball 30 times the previous game.
Right.
So, them going back, this is their Super Bowl, that kind of thing. So I had a 4-unit on the Hornets, which won. I had LaMelo Ball, which won. I had Longwood. There are 2 universities that I root for more than any other, Scott. One is Longwood, and the other one is Morehead State.
Well, I get it. I'm not going to jump into it, but I get it. That's kind of funny. Yeah. I was watching the Laker game last night, by the way, and Ball was just teeing off in the second half. I mean, he was the reason they won that game. It was a very interesting situation for the Lakers on defense. You notice I've skipped right past Longwood and Morehead State, but didn't even throw Ball State in the mix. So, but anyway, I'm watching the game last night, and he just tore through a team that's not good defensively right now, which is the Lakers. And by the way, very good prop and a handicap. I wish I talked to you before the game got underway because, I wasn't even thinking about the fact that, he's going back to LA, and he was able to destroy that defense. The Lakers are 18-1 right now, and they were bet after the Doncic trade. And I think you and I might have talked about it a couple of weeks ago right after the trade about, I don't think this Lakers team is going deep into the postseason. I really don't. They're not big enough defensively. I think next year is when Doncic can make some noise for this team. They pick up somebody in the offseason. Doesn't have to be a 15, 16 point per game scorer inside, just has to be able to protect the rim. Plus, Doncic, we watch Doncic. He's out of shape right now. He'll get better as the season progresses, but he's not there right now. Plus, there's some stiff competition when you talk about OKC. I will say this, though, one of the things that I do like about the Lakers, Hachimura is having to do a lot more on offense because they don't have anybody right now other than LeBron, Doncic, once in a while, Austin Reeves, if he doesn't get thrown out of the game like he did on a Wednesday night. Hachimura is averaging about 7 more points per game than he was before the trade. They're having to rely on him a lot. He's throwing down about 20 a night. Now, on Wednesday night, he came up short. I didn't have the prop, but it went down to about 18.5, opened about 19.5. He scored 17. He must have had a million chances in the final 3 minutes to get over 17, including missing a pair of free throws down the stretch. And I knew some guys who were on Hachimura, and I was just really bummed for them because he should have got over. But anyway, having said that, your thoughts on the Lakers, and do you like that Hachimura prop? And I'm not saying it's an automatic every night, folks, but it's one of those things you want to look into every night.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been interesting to see if they would have picked up Mark Williams, which is funny because he played against them and he played well.
Sure.
And, they also have Dalton Connect, obviously, too. Yeah, I think Hachimura is good. I also like their young core, too, because that's what Hachimura is not their high ceiling guy,
Right.
Their high ceiling guy is going to be Jackson Hayes to really develop him. And they picked up Alex Len, which is interesting because maybe I think they think that and that has JJ Redick's fingerprints all over it. Bringing in a veteran, bringing in somebody that he trusts that can step up there. I think the Hachimura prop is good. I think I think taking a look at going forward, maybe what Lynn does with this team, that'll be interesting. But yeah, no, I think the Hachimura prop is good, and I always like to take Austin Reeves on a bounce back.
Yes.
He rarely has back-to-back horrible shooting games, but when he has a bad shooting game, he's going to be sort of like what that Washington Kuzma was for him.
Oh yeah, okay.
He's just going to come up and start chucking stuff. So, and but yeah, no, I think that's good. I think the two that are most interesting are Hachimura and Austin Reeves on bounce backs.
By the way, I'm going to throw something out there based on your Longwood Moorhead State. I was watching the Sports Center back when Kuzma first came into the league, and they kept calling him Kuz. I tweeted out, they don't know what they're talking about right now. I'll leave it at that, as we both dropped to about the level of 12-year-old kids here right now when it comes to our maturity level.
That's my frequency, dude. That's pretty much where I teeter.
That's what my wife always says. She goes, you're really good at, running things in the house and all that kind of stuff, but your sense of humor is like a 12-year-old. So there you go. I'm with you. Let's talk a little Badger basketball in college. I mean, listen, I just said Lakers, not for me at 18-1. Wisconsin's gone from 40-1 to 28-1 just in the last few weeks. And I got to tell you, man, I like this team. Now, do I think they should be in the Final Four? Probably not. Is there a potential for hedgeability down the road? Potentially. But they're sitting 7th in the Ken Palm ratings. And I'm punching it up here right now because I want to make sure that I still have them, or Ken Palm still has them where they did this morning. But they're sitting 7th right now, Wisconsin. They're 28-1. Alabama's one spot ahead of Wisconsin in the Ken Palm power ratings. They're 12-1. Iowa State's power rated 9th, and they're 16-1. So listen, you can always say there's never any value on a team to win the national championship because the odds aren't what they really definitely should be. But throwing that all aside, it's all relevant. I don't think Wisconsin's bad for a hedgeability possibility. What I like this year, I see, if you look at Greg Gard, he's been coach there now for 9 years, and even Bo Ryan before that, that was a team that loved to slow down the tempo. And I think I saw in 9 years, they were in the top 300 one time when it came to tempo. This year, I mean, they're not Alabama as far as tempo, but they're top 180, 190, and they don't have to win, first team to 65 anymore. We just saw them score 94 points 2 games in a row. I like this team. I think they're going to be surprising a few teams in the tournament, potentially get to the Elite Eight, potentially.
Yeah, a couple things about Greg Carter. He took over this team at 45 years old, and he's 54 now. So he took over him, pretty young, and he's sort of done his Nick Saban part 2, right? He's learned and he's kind of moved along with the times. And last year they're 21-5 this year. Last year they're 22-14. But I think he realized something that for him to really get better, they're going to have to get better on offense.
Yep.
And so now they're a top 10 offense. I'll tell you the 2 things that really shocked me with them. The fact they went to Purdue and beat them by 10 on the road, that was impressive,
Sure.
Very impressive about that. And the fact that they had an early win against Arizona, 103-88, which was like, okay, And I think that going on the road to beat Purdue, that's probably one of the most impressive things. But then again, Purdue has lost 3 in a row as well. So I don't know. But the one thing that concerns me about this team is that they're not big.
Yeah,
they're outside the top 230 in in offensive rebounding, and they're outside the top 250 in blocks. So it's like if it doesn't fall for them, they can't win an ugly basketball game. The opposite of what they used to be.
Sure.
So we'll see what happens with them.
That's true. I mean, 4 of their top 6 scorers are guards. So it's one of those things where if you're going to look to play on them when we get to the big dance, just check out their opponent and see if they got a couple of the guards who could match up and have a big guy or 2 inside and can clean the glass, because you just did hit on their Achilles heel, and that is a thought. But I just love seeing a team that's power rated 7th that's getting 28-1 odds. Maybe my eyes get too big. It's like ordering too much food when you're hungry and not being able to finish, one of those things. So anyway, but listen, let's talk some college basketball Saturday. There are some big games going on this weekend. One of those is Iowa State at Houston. And this line's going to be around 7.5 in that neighborhood. Man, the Cougars are men among boys every time they take the floor. They have some shooting woes at times, inside the 3-point line. That scares you a little bit. Oh, by the way, speaking of coaches who've really picked up the tempo this year, TJO, Otzelberger over at Iowa State, they're playing much quicker than they ever have under TJO since he's been there, since he unfortunately left UNLV. what a bunch of bozos at UNLV back then to let him get away. And I'm in Vegas, folks, so I'm a UNLV guy. But anyway, having said that, it's going to be interesting because we've seen Iowa State struggle a couple of times on the road, and Houston can be fierce when they get ahead. They make it awfully tough on you to come back against them.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about this game is the fact that, I don't know why UNLV let them go. That was a mistake. But this is an Iowa State team that won on the road against Texas Tech, which is impressive. And then they didn't have a letdown and beat Kansas at home. Mm-hmm. Houston, of course, comes off after that Texas Tech loss. They've then gone on to win 5 in a row. The first thing I sort of thought about when I saw this game was maybe the under, right? Mm-hmm. But that just seems kind of too obvious too. But I will tell you this, that, this line as it comes out here, Iowa State beat them 69-41 last year.
Yes. Yep.
So that's something that Houston will remember. And I like the fact that Houston comes in. Very rarely does Calvin Sampson lose something that bad. So they're going to be motivated. I also like the fact that Iowa State comes off a road win against UCF because I don't think they're going to come in as sharp. And they have that bad loss to Kansas on the road by 17. And if they lose to Kansas on the road by 17, it might be a long day here. They also lost to Arizona on the road too, and West Virginia. Houston might clobber them.
Yeah, you mentioned Kelvin Sampson. That's one of the teams, or with him being as the coach especially. I was asked this on a radio show about a month ago. We were talking college baskets, and they were talking about, do I look at revenge spots for teams that got knocked off in March by the opponent they're about to face? And I said, not nearly as much as I used to. And it's because of the transfer portal, kids leaving after a season. And you'll look at a lot of lineups now. At the start of a season, you'll see one returning starter, no returning starters, things of that nature. But Sampson and the group he has, I think they'll be drilling that into their minds that they got throttled by almost 30 in March. It was a March loss too against Iowa State. And I think that does play into Houston hands here. So I tend to agree with you. If this number's around 7-ish when it opens up Friday afternoon, I think Houston's the right side of this one. Next up, Tennessee at Texas A&M as we head to the SEC. Looks like Tennessee will probably be about a 1.5-point favorite in that neighborhood. Not going to be surprised if it's a half point off or so. But listen, I like what Tennessee's done for the most part when it comes to some of the play under Rick Barnes as far as their defensive play. They play an extremely slow pace. I was doing VSiN last night on Wednesday night. I do a weekly with those guys. And they asked me about Tennessee, IC, and they said, what do you think about this team going deep? And I said, they're like Hank Iba would have loved this Volunteers team. And then I had to backtrack and say, okay, everybody under 50 listening to VSiN tonight, you need to go Google the name Hank Iba because you probably don't know who he is. But that's who they are. I mean, they play great defense. They're 21st slowest in college basketball in tempo, 3rd against the 3, 11th against the 2, number 1 in defensive adjusted efficiency. I think they could go into A&M and steal a win. And one thing about A&M, they've only made 50% or more of their 2-point shots one time this month in about 4 or 5 games.
Yeah, what's interesting about this game is that Tennessee lost their last road game to Kentucky, which I like. And, they also lost to Auburn by 2 before that. But they did beat Oklahoma on the road, to their credit. Texas A&M lost to Mississippi State, probably looking ahead to this game. And typically they bounce back on the defensive end. But when you look at this game, Tennessee also beat them 86-51 last time too. But prior to that, A&M had won, so they've kind of split the series. I think this is and those games are total at 140 and 149. So we'll see what comes out in this game. This is a hard game for me because what you have here is a Tennessee team that has you have A&M that has revenge and who comes off a bad loss. But Tennessee is a team that has the ability to win such big games, right? Yeah. Beating Florida by 20 at home, beating Missouri by 4 at home. And you also have Tennessee that lost to Kentucky on the road, which means they're going to come out and focus. But I'm going to take a flyer here on on Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M, the fact that they beat Texas Tech is impressive. The fact they also beat Missouri is impressive. And I like the fact they only put up 54 points in the last game against Mississippi State. That's a bad loss. It's a team that only scored 31 at the half, and they only had 37 points going into the final 10 minutes. That's going to piss them off. So I'm going to take a small lean here on A&M.
Imagine if this team could shoot. They play well on defense. They're very well disciplined. A&M. If they make 50% of their twos, they're going to beat most teams. on just about any night of the week. So a dangerous team, no doubt about it. How about Kentucky, Alabama? Staying in the SEC, Bama laying around 7.5. Again, these are approximate numbers based on power ratings of ours and, of course, Ken Palm, and we put them all together. But Bama about a 7.5 point favorite, no likelihood, over Kentucky at home. There are two teams that bottomed out this week. One of those is Kansas, who's bottomed out as a program in my lifetime the other night against BYU. They might be dangerous on Saturday. That's one of those teams that's going to be either I play on them or I stay away from the game, because I think Bill Self's going to be able to raise some hell in the clubhouse after bottoming out. Alabama bottomed out season-wise, not necessarily program-wise. And I think it had a lot to do with the emotional loss to Auburn. They came out from that game, and I was talking about Bama thinking they'd probably bounce back against Mizzou. But at the same time, I was saying on some shows that I'm really worried about their mental state coming off that Auburn loss. And they were flat from the start against Missouri. They had a horrible night. Any way you look at it, Alabama. They're going to be tough against Kentucky in this game. I think they refocus, get the job done straight up and against the spread, I see.
Yeah, that's great points, Scott. And they had not lost back-to-back games all year. They come in having lost back-to-back games. And this is a team that beat Kentucky already once, 102-97. It's a team that gave up 110 points in their last game to Missouri. Those are not good things. Kentucky, of course, coming off that nice win against Vandy, and they had also lost to Texas 82-78. And they had also lost their last road game to Ole Miss. And they've all lost their last two road games too. So they're going to be fully focused. I am going to take a flyer here on the under, which means someone should shoot me because I should never take a total. But the total came in at 179, and that game went to 201.
Right.
I think Alabama. I like the fact that Kentucky comes off of a loss on the road, back-to-back losses. I think that allows them to be focused. I also think they will come out a little bit flat on the offensive end because they just destroyed Vanderbilt. And when they faced Alabama, they gave up 102 points to them last time, right? So they've got to make an adjustment. Plus, you have Alabama giving up 110 points to Missouri, which is a ridiculous amount for Alabama. So both these teams come off basically almost season highs, right? Kentucky facing the team who they gave the highest point total to, which is 102 points, and they gave up 100 to Florida, but they still won. So given that they had given up their most number of points, given that Alabama comes off of a loss and 110 points themselves, I like the under.
Yeah, I tell you what, I watched that game against Mizzou, at least the first 15 minutes of game time. Missouri made 26 of 35 two-pointers against Bama. They had 47 free throw attempts to 21 for the Tide. It was just a real flat spot. As I mentioned, it was a bottom out for the season. That's why I like them to bounce back. Also, I wish this team would, don't settle for threes. I get it against Auburn. You were down. Against Mizzou, you were down. You were trying to come back and you shot a bunch of threes. It's the second most accurate 2-point shooting team in the country. They make over 60.5% of their twos. And the reason I like them here, besides being refocused, is that Kentucky's outside the top 240 when it comes to defending the 2-point shot. So I think that all plays into Alabama getting the season sweep and the season cover as far as the spread is concerned against these Kentucky Wildcats. Before we call it a night, I wanted to mention we get a few people who will chime in on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, and they like to talk about the show a little bit. And I had one of those people asking me about first they said, do you do anything differently the final month of the season, let's say mid-Feb and to mid-March, and then of course conference tournaments and all that kind of stuff. And then they asked me to ask you also if you're, doing that also. I mean, I'll give my thoughts in just a second, but fire away. And if you're not doing anything different, that's perfectly fine. I just wondered, and so did the following over at Twitter.
I love taking teams with the worst record in conference play because that is now they start fresh. So when you get a really shitty team facing a top caliber team, right? So, I like taking them, let's say you have it's one of these like 8 seeds versus 16 seeds, right? I like taking the 16 seed or the 14 seed, especially near the end of the season. I mean, they play like their head is on fire, right? Especially if a team that's already sort of locked in a spot here. I like them. And what will happen is they'll come in like a 14.5 point dog, and then they'll lose by like 5, So that's something that I look for. You look for classic bubble teams that are on the bubble that are trying to get in. And I also like to look for, teams that in the conference championships, obviously when a team is trying to get in versus a team that's a perennial favorite. Iowa State Houston was like that. Remember last year when Houston got clobbered? Houston was guaranteed a spot. Iowa State was a little sketchy. They're trying to, maneuver for some spots. So those are the three things that I look for. Number one, teams that are trying to get in, and the perennial favorite that's going to try to win the conference tournament anyway, which is utterly useless. I like taking those teams. I like taking really, really bad teams early on in the conference tournament because that's their Super Bowl, and they get a fresh start. And I think I gave you one more, but those are the three things that I like to look at.
Yeah, and you know what? Speaking of bad teams and jumping on bad teams when they're getting points, it's something I do the final month of the season when it comes to, like, I'll give you two examples. Sam Houston playing Jacksonville State last week. Sam Houston, it was like 8-9 game losing streak, whatever it was. Jacksonville State's winning games left and right. They're having a good season. Yet the books open Sam Houston the favorite. And so a bunch of people jumped on, Jacksonville State to get Sam Houston. Sam Houston wins the game outright. That's something I like to do. Another good example was Wednesday night. You had Nebraska, who had won 405, playing well for the most part this season, working hard to try to get a first-round bye in the Big Ten tournament. And they go up against Penn State, who had lost 11 out of 12, only covered like 1 out of the last 6 or 7. Penn State opens the favorite. Man, that's the book signaling to me that, this is the team to jump on, and I did. It was a 6-star for me on Wednesday. So those are a couple of things I like to do late in the season. Another thing is when we start to get to conference tournaments, and IC and I will talk about this in a couple of weeks when we start to get into it, but look for teams that won both meetings during the course of the regular season. Check out their metrics. And if they dominated metric-wise and they won those 2 games, play them again. I mean, it's not automatic, but more often than not, I'm going to play them again. One quick note also, because I was asked this by the same guy on Twitter, is he wanted me to discuss bottom-up to top-down handicapping and betting. And I'm of the more traditional bottom-up handicapper. I assume most people are. And bottom-up handicapping is, again, the traditional stuff. Examples would be individual matchups against each other, let's say 3-point offensive percentages and defensive percentages. Same with 2-point shooting, how teams match up against each other, strengths versus weaknesses, what most people would expect from most cappers. And I then make my numbers and then compare them with Ken Palm, wait for the opening numbers to come out, and there you have a potential play. The top-down bettor is going to be someone who's watching multiple sports books. In a nutshell, they're all about market analysis, identifying market inefficiency. So they might see on their line service 9 books that have a dog, let's say at +2, and then one book has it +3 or +3.5. They take advantage of that book, and you've got to be watching your line service if you're going to be a top-down player. I've got like 15 to 18 books on my line service, so you really do have to pay attention throughout the course of the day. Using bottom-up capping makes me analyze games a little bit deeper, not just looking at market inefficiency, which you do factor into a certain extent. But that's why I talk about, why IC talks about Friday afternoons for us are 12-hour days, folks, for those Saturday college basketball cards when there's 100+ games, because I am a traditional capper. Look for all those matchups. But I hope I explained that nice and plain and easily. And thanks to those of you who jumped on and asked about what is the difference, top-down to bottom-up handicapping, because you do hear it more and more as people start to catch on and are smarter than they used to be when it comes to betting. So I see we're going to do another white chocolate next week. It'll be up Thursday night, Friday morning, February 28th. We're going to cut these videos every Thursday night throughout the rest of the basketball season and into baseball season. I thought it'd be really cool if we, and IC did too, if we talk about upcoming series in baseball Friday through Sunday. It'll be a great way to kick off the weekend with white chocolate. Any final thoughts before we call it a night, IC?
No final thoughts. I mean, I agree with you. I think the Luka trade is coming back down to earth, right? Mm-hmm. That poor Dallas GM got torched. I mean, really bad. But I'm going to tell you something. I don't think Luka ever gets in shape.
Probably not this year, at least.
Yeah, I don't think he gets in shape. And the Lakers need a big man. And maybe they'll make a run at it when they pick up a big man in the draft, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe Jackson Hayes is that guy. A lot of good big men coming up. They can get a good one there. And LeBron can stay healthy one more year. Luka gets a little healthier. They can maybe make a run and they can pick up one. They're gonna be active this offseason for sure.
Sure.
I mean, it's who I mean, wouldn't you want to go play with Luka and LeBron?
Yeah, you got a good head coach too.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with JJ Redick thus far.
No, he's
so
coming
anyway. Good stuff, man. He's Indian Cowboy. I'm Scott Spreitzer. You can check us out on Twitter, of course. What is it? Indian Cowboy Picks, correct?
Yep.
And of course, I'm at Scott Wins. Not being cocky, but nobody knows how to spell Spreitzer. I did until I was 18. So there you go. And we're, of course, at DocSports.com exclusively. For IC, I'm Scott. You know what to do, everybody. Put them in the win column. We are White Chocolate.